I tell a story, Rory's brother, Liam. You guys know Rory McIlroy has a brother?
Nope.
Never met him, no.
One brother?
Yeah.
Didn't know that. There's this amazing home video. I'm not sure who's shooting it, but you can see Rory's dad with his brother, and they're, I don't know, 4 or something at these little cutoff clubs. And all right, tees one up. Rory's dad tees one up for Liam. Liam steps in there, and he takes a practice swing, and it is just butter, right? This awesome move. Steps up to the ball, not quite close enough, clips the toe of the club. This ball shoots like dead the wrong way, right? So then Rory stepped up. No, Liam wants one more swing. Okay, fine. One more swing, puts the ball up. And now he makes this rigid, stiff, over the top move, but connects, goes pretty good for a 5-year-old, right? Boom, solid contact. Rory steps up, makes the exact same swing as Liam first on the practice swing, right? Looks perfect. Steps a little close to the ball, hits it dead out of the center. So now, okay, to make it fair, he gets another shot. Second one's dead out of the center. Boom. And then Liam steps up to hit his 3rd shot. And now he's got that over-the-top, terrible move. Never heard of Liam, have you? No, that's not a true story.
Yeah.
I don't think Rory does not have a brother, Liam.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
But
I love it. We're on tenterhooks here. Like, who's Liam McIlroy?
Why am I so gullible? What is going on?
Yeah, Google search.
Yeah, like how close you are to going down a different path.
Yeah, like you can self-organize into crap really quickly, because how good your swing is, how good your move is, has very little to do with the ball flight when you're first learning.
Thanks for coming on. And then, for our listeners, just sort of describe who you are, how you got into your golf mechanics research, and then what you do now.
Yeah, Dr. Sasho MacKenzie. I'm a sports biomechanics professor at a small university in Canada called St. Francis Xavier University. I teach biomechanics, quantitative research methods, and do a lot of research and consulting in the golf industry. How I got here, I guess I have a PhD in kinesiology. Really enjoyed playing golf. Big sports background. My interests are in optimizing sport performance and training techniques.
Nice. And then I wrote a whole interview based on your research, scrapped it, and then rewrote a new interview thinking, what does a golfer want listening from here? So I think I sent over some themes, but really the key themes I'd like to go over and just get your insight is sort of, first of all, talk about accuracy in the golf swing, then move on to distance in the golf swing, a little bit on coaching, and then finish off with the stack system, which you're involved in. Is that okay as a plan?
Yeah, that's a great plan. I was really excited about the old plan, but I wasn't sure if we were going to cover it in under 4.5 hours. But
well, that is the plan I sent you. Yeah, no, that was plan B that I sent you. But I know it was more like a lifetime's work rather than a 45-minute interview, wasn't it? So, could you just sort of explain that? I've put this down, sort of accuracy in the golf swing. Could you give your insight for people listening into, well, what's the basics and what's important at impact? And then some of your research that you've looked at into, well, what may affect people's accuracy or ability to be consistent in where they hit the golf ball?
Yeah, I like the term consistent, maybe. The ability to execute the shot as intended is kind of a way that I would like to describe that. What goes into a golfer's ability to execute the shot as intended? I need more constraints. Well, I need more constraints. What give me some more, because I've got I need to know a little bit more about what you're looking for.
Yeah, no worries. So I think if we look at sort of the basic concept of impact.
Okay.
As soon as someone hits the ball consistently out the center of the club face, we quite well agreed that, club face is going to have the biggest impact on where that golf ball goes. And, swing path, club face relationship is quite important. Am I right in thinking you did a little bit of research around looking at rate of face closure and what elite players do? So I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So So if you have a shot that you're intending to hit in mind, maybe a nice little draw, then you're going to want to have your face be a little bit closed to your path. And that's going to create the situation where you get a nice spin axis tilt on the ball, and the nice draw is going to ensue. And the face angle is probably going to be more variable within a golfer than the path will be. So it's probably not too out of control to think that someone could always keep their path going in to out. It's a struggle for a lot of golfers, but most golfers have a very consistent path out to in, cutting across it. But it's the keeping the face relationship relative to that path that seems to be a little bit more challenging. That's the variable that we'd like to control a little bit more. And if we're going to relate that to rate of closure, then rate of closure is how fast that face angle is changing as the club head comes into the ball. And I usually have some golf clubs kicking around here.
Oh, see, we need to put this up on YouTube. This interview.
Oh, we're gonna put this one up. Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
This is the social clip right here.
Oh yeah, that's right. You guys are just sound, but sometimes you put in clips, right? If you're.
Oh no, don't worry.
We're doing clips for this one.
Yeah.
So rate of closure. This is where I want to be at impact. As that club head's coming into the ball, that face is going to be closing, or we could look at it from above, right? That face angle is going to be closing as we come into impact. So it seems intuitive that maybe the lower that rate of closing is at impact. So if you have that face perfectly square a foot before the ball and perfectly square a foot after the ball, then shoot, how can anything go wrong? That's got to reduce my variability, my inconsistency in delivering that face angle. But there's not much evidence to suggest that that's true. If I've got a putting green in my back, you can see behind me, I've got motion capture cameras. They can go up to 10,000 frames per second. I've collected a few thousand putts tracking the putter and the ball. So even if we just look at something as simple as putting, golfers that have essentially zero rate of closure in putting have no higher correlation to putting performance than golfers who have a really high rate of closure in putting. So someone hitting a 10-foot putt, they might have the putter closing at 80 degrees per second. And they might sink 80% of their 11-footers in my lab. One of the best putters in my lab that can sink 80% of 11-footers has a ridiculously high rate of closure relative to the population of golfers. But they seem to be able to sync up that face to be very repeatable, the actual face angle at impact, very consistently. Then I have some other golfers who are very consistent putters who have essentially zero rate of closure with the putter through impact. Now that's not full swing, but it certainly gives us some evidence into maybe how important this is. It's still the same idea. Arguably, face angle is more important in putting even than it is in driving the golf ball. But then if you go to driving, same thing. I collect data in my lab on driving, and there doesn't seem to be much correlation between rate of closure in the driver and dispersion or handicap. And I have some close ties with Ping. Do a lot of consulting with Ping. They've got thousands and thousands of shots with drivers as they're doing driver tests. And a few years ago, they said, "Hey, well, since we got all this data, we have." What's their dispersion? And we also have what's their rate of closure. Let's see if we can find a correlation. And there really wasn't one. Now, that's not to say that getting a golfer to feel like they're, what a golf instructor might say is the face is a little bit more stable through impact isn't a bad thing. And certainly that there hasn't been any research done that I'm aware of to say we've got these golfers that have whatever rates of closure they have, whether it's low for a driver, like 1,000 degrees per second would be very, very low, or 4,000 degrees per second would be very, very high. What if we made everybody have a lower rate of closure? Do they improve their repeatability? There's not much evidence to suggest that would happen, but certainly that study hasn't been done yet.
Nice. Connor, you've got a question. I've got a few questions.
Oh, I've got
10,000
questions. Yeah, wow. So rate of closure is something that I've been super interested in because I had an instructor in the past that was very adamant about it. And I guess I have 3 questions. One, what do you use to measure it? Do you use the GC quad? Is that what you use for measuring rate of closure with the face dots?
No, I have, I've got, in my own motion capture lab, I put markers on the club head.
Oh, oh my gosh, so cool.
Very
so it's kind of like,
them.
yeah, it's kind of like, if you're familiar with gears, it's kind of like gears, but
I don't recognize those cameras, so I'm guessing that's the Vicon rather than the Qualisys system behind you. Is that...
No, this is actually motion analysis. So it's another company altogether. But these are the Raptor E cameras. They can go up to 10,000 frames per second.
Nice.
So I got 11 cameras. I can crank them up to 10,000 frames per second, so I can dial in. And when I do putting research, if I really need, you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah. I'm loving this lapel mic.
I love the lapel mic.
We're getting a little tour around the biomechanics lab at the same time.
So I can get down to about a 0.2 millimeters of accuracy, but when I'm doing, so I was doing some shaft stiffness research on putting, and I can use just even a little bit smaller markers.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. I use my own motion capture system mostly to measure rate of closure.
Okay.
Do you want to go with your next question, Connor?
Yeah. I have two real quick ones. The second one would be, when you talk about rate of closure, I would think that has mostly to do with your forearm, rotating and unrotating, supinating and pronating. Is that correct? The right forearm for a right-hander and a left forearm for the left-hander. Is that what affects face opening and closing?
Yeah, predominantly. I like to think of it, you can think of it as body motions. So certainly rate of closure will peak at impact, and it will be, in terms of a body motion, most highly correlated with lead forearm supination. Okay. So yeah, but both hands are connected to the grip, so they're constrained to kind of move together. But certainly if you were going to do pick a variable in the body that's most highly correlated to rate of closure, would be lead forearm supination. But even if you don't have any supination, and then you want to link it to the club, so that lead forearm supination is going to result in angular velocity about the shaft. So I'm a bit close to the camera, but I'll back up a little bit here. So if I was to pronate and supinate my forearm, then that's going to open and close the shaft, predominantly because I'm twisting the shaft about its long axis.
Right.
But even if I have zero twisting about the shaft, just the fact that this club is swung, so think of an extreme version of Dustin Johnson, right? Where that thing is shut the whole time, or like a like croquet type of motion. Just because the swing is on an inclined plane, I'm going to have a minimum amount of rate of closure. If I'm swinging the club like a Ferris wheel, then I have zero rate of closure. But the average golfer swinging at 100 miles an hour at a 45-degree angle, at swing plane somewhere around 45 degrees, is still going to have 1,600 degrees of rate of closure and impact, even if they're doing no twisting about the shaft, no pronation supination of the forearms. So sometimes I see some reports from systems out there that say, oh, this rate of closure was 800 degrees per second. Not possible. For their speed, right? So there's certain things that you just know that's probably going to be a measurement error.
So I think one question with that, so just to clarify, is the rate of closure is relative to the target rather than relative to the path that the club's moving on?
Yeah, I have 3 rates of closure that I define, and they're all very, very similar, and they'll all be very correlated together. So my favorite one, because it's most consistent throughout the motion, is I lay an axis on the face, right? and how fast is the face rotating about that axis.
Okay.
Is how I define rate of closure. But that's my favorite. I also define it as, hey, this is the direction that, something that's coming out of the club face. Because this is how we define face angle. So if I had this T coming out of the club head, how is that, if I was to look at it from above, how is that angle changing relative to the target line?
Nice. Okay.
That's another rate of closure that I define. And they're going to pretty much line up at impact.
Yeah.
But you get this definition, you get some very weird things happening at different points in the swing.
Right.
But at impact, it doesn't really matter which one you pick.
So,
Right.
I think digging sort of a little bit deeper into that. So you said that there's no correlation between rate of closure and performance. What about consistency in someone's rate of closure and performance? Is that a variable that you've looked at?
Yeah. And Ping found the same thing, that if you have, so your rate of closure could be 3,500 degrees per second with the driver, which would be considered high. But if you had 3,500 degrees per second every swing, that's going to correlate. That you're going to be a player that I would predict is a very good golfer. You have a low handicap.
Nice.
You could have a rate of closure of 1,000 degrees per second, which would be very, very low. And if you went 1,500, 500, 1,200, but your average was 1,000, then you would be probably not a very good golfer. So yeah, getting into the motor control thing, there's good variability and bad variability. In golf, I mostly see variability is mostly bad, despite the theories out there, which apply to a lot of other sports. I don't see them. Golf seems to be the more things you can reduce the variability in, the higher correlation to performance. We can get into that a little bit later if you want.
Yeah, certainly. Connor, question.
So and this is kind of the third branch of the multi-legged question that I'm asking regarding this. But with regards to what teachers have been teaching, then they've been teaching this concept that doesn't have, and I guess that's what a lot of teachers do for the most part with most of the things that we're teaching. We don't have data. We just have learned it from other teachers, and we maybe felt it was helpful or it makes sense to us. But then now we're teaching players to improve by reducing the rate of closure. Do you feel like that's probably a misstep, and that they would be, and this is maybe a loaded question, but do you feel like that's a misstep, and do you feel like it would be better to train the consistency aspect of it instead? So whatever your rate of closure is, making it more repeatable.
Yeah, I might not go quite as far as saying as a misstep. I think I know golf instructors that do things that, this might not apply to all golf instructors, but that teach things that will result in a lower rate of closure. They've seen that, hey, this golfer's improved. I've got some ideas on how I want them to change their swing. Let's work on that. Let's do some drills. Hey, they've changed their swing. Look, their rate of closure is down and they're playing better. But it wasn't necessarily, let's reduce your rate of closure. But that certainly would lead an instructor to say, hey, well, if this happened, then maybe it was because the rate of closure has decreased. So I don't know if I'd go as far as a misstep, but I certainly wouldn't say, hey, look, let's make sure we target this rate of closure as the goal to lower. But if it happened to be reduced because of other things you're trying to change in the swing, then that's okay. But those same, one golf instructor, I'm thinking of John Sinclair. If you came to him and you had, you were a tour player and your, strokes gained approach was, you're in the top 10 and your rate of closure is really high, he's not going to work on things that are going to reduce your rate of closure. It's not an issue, right?
Yeah. If it isn't broke, do not try and fix it.
But I know some very good players that started trying to work on their rate of closure despite being world-class ball strikers. So it's like, it's a hard thing as a player because you hear things and you want to get better, but then if there's no data behind it. And that's really hard with golf. So I'm excited to talk to you because I'd love to find what things you find are really correlated to performance.
Right.
And which ones are just dogma. I don't want to teach no dogma. No dogma.
Yeah. Well, consistency, what makes a movement more repeatable is a very interesting area of research. Will might know more about this than me, but I've yet to find, every year I spend a lot of time searching literature. I have students that search the literature. I haven't found an article that suggested in any area of research, could be typing a keyboard, could be throwing a dart, that says, look, we found that this pattern of movement produces more repeatable results than any other pattern of movement. Even for something as simple as hitting a key on a keyboard or throwing a dart, let alone something as complex as a golf swing. So it's tough. Yeah, well.
Well, I happily attempt to jump in on that one and say you're correct. But I think, when you think about the human body and movement, you've got 600 odd muscles working across 200 joints. So huge array of complexity. And when you're looking at consistency, I think it's consistency in what and why should the human body make this consistent. So I've actually got a study I haven't published, just got some data where we always think that golfers try and stabilize the endpoint at impact. But I was quite interested in, we've got this other source of variability, which is in the ball flight itself. So I got a few pros in and just said, hit to this normalized target with your 6-iron and get the ball to land as closely as possible. And without telling them, what I was interested in is, do better players have less variability impact, or do they actually have more unique movement solutions and ways of squaring up the face correctly to that swing path? And again, I was thinking, well, maybe players have the same amount of variability, but they're just better at managing these different solutions. But I haven't got enough players through. All I can say so far is you have some players who are very rigid and very structured in terms of their ball flight and launch, but you do have equally good players who have more variability in face and path, but seem to manage it better and get the ball to the target. So trying to unpick variability in the swing when we don't even know what's happening at this ball flight level, I think is tough. So I think we're a long way from answering it, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think I would add more. Not to go into your particular research project, but the task constraints and the instructions are obviously super important there. Yeah. You could have Bubba Watson and say, look, I just want the ball to finish on the target. Like I know with Ping, if they're getting him to do some club testing, which they don't do a lot because he is so variable. But he's, hey, Bubba, can you hit a stock 4-iron? Well, what do you tell me what you want me to hit? There's no, like, what do you want? What do you want from me? So if you just said, hey, I need this ball to, to finish 200 yards out. Here's your 7-iron. He would hit 80 different shots and the ball would finish 200 yards out. But if you said, look, I think it would be different if you said, I need you to hit a high draw here, right? You're going to hit a high draw and I want this to land 200 yards out. Then all of a sudden, even Bubba Watson, in my opinion, from what I've seen, would all of a sudden, all the variabilities would collapse. I don't think you would see him have one swing where it was 8 degrees positive path and 6-degree face, and then the next one 4 degrees path and 2 degrees face, both producing a high draw. I don't think you would see that.
No.
I think you would see him, high draw. This is how I hit the high draw.
Yeah. And it's a very stable solution within that.
Yeah, like I haven't done that so much with. I've seen data. I haven't done it so much with hitting a multitude of shots. Whenever I'm doing club tests in the lab, I have golfers warm up, and as they're getting near the end of the warm up, I say, okay, let's say I'm doing some shoe testing or some club testing. It's very important that they have the same intent for every single shot. I can't have a golfer come in here and say, after 8 shots, you know what, the fade's not working. I'm going to, line up close and play a draw. Well, was that the club that produced that change or the shoes? Or so as we're ending the warm-up session, I will say, all right, I want you to settle in on a shot. And most of the golfers are local, or I'll have them pick a course or something. I'll say, okay, look, we're on hole number 13. It's a tough driving hole, but you still have to get it, pretty far down the fairway. What shot would you usually play? Well, I play a draw. Okay, we got 4 balls left here in warm up. You need to settle in on an intent, a feeling, and for the next 36 test shots after that, you are trying to do the exact same thing. It might not happen. So if you feel like, oh, my downswing was too quick, well, that's okay. Then the next swing, you're going to try to slow down your tempo. But you have an intent that you're going to use for every shot here. When I take, what I have done with variability is I've had putts in the lab. I'll set up the exact same 6 putts. One's a right to left 14-footer. One's a straight uphill 8-footer. A whole bunch of different putts, and I'll have golfers come in over 4 different days and hit all these putts. So they're the same putts, but they're in different orders. The golfers that, and you might say, when this good putter, he's sinking everything. One day when he comes to this 6th putt, he's going to line up more open and kind of push it. Because you have all these degrees of freedom. There's lots of ways to get the ball started on the line. That is not what I see. I see you could, if where their feet are standing, where their head is in space, the best golfers, you give them that putt, that it's a unique putt, but it's not the same putt over and over again. You bring them back for it, they're going to be doing the same thing they did the last time they hit that exact same putt. They're not, even though they have a whole bunch of different movement solutions, they're not using them. If I constrain them, if I put like a big pile of rough behind them, that really good golfer would still be able to find a unique movement solution to sink that putt. But if you give them the same constraints, they're picking a movement solution that they like.
I think that sums up this section really well, which is really the data on accuracy is there's no perfect solution, but consistency appears to be key. Is that correct? Yeah. Before we move on to the next section, is there anything else on accuracy which you'd like to just share from your research and insight?
Lots of talk there, but nothing practical. To me, regardless of all the theory, right? Hey, there's no motor programs. There's this just a bunch of constraints, and we, have these general ideas with reduced degrees of freedom. And regardless of what it is, I think we can learn from, and all that stuff's very important to understand. But what's the best way to practice, right? So regardless of how we, develop our motor control, I think that it's important to practice better. So if you need to improve, for most golfers, if you want to get better, might not be necessarily about finding a more repeatable movement pattern, but probably more about practicing better with the movement pattern you have.
I've got my own insight on this, but what does practicing better look like to you?
Well, I think that very quickly, if you can't make contact, then you're a very new golfer. Then it's okay to hit your 7-iron all the time from a flat lie off a tee. So I've got 3 young kids. Chipping, you can the environmental constraints that can pop up with chipping and pitching around a green with all the different lies and stances and everything can be really tough when learning. So you're learning chipping the first time you're a 5-year-old, every ball is off a tee. And it's always it's the same chip over and over again initially till you get good contact and it's fun and great. Tour player at the other extreme, if you're doing a chipping lesson, I would suggest, hey, hit 2 chips in a row that are identical from the same lie. And then just walk around the green, dropping balls into random lies, random hole locations, uphill, downhill. That's simplifying it. But that's what I would mean by practicing better, kind of meaning what you're, use a familiar term, challenge point, right? So
nice.
So I have a question, Sasho. I have a couple younger students that I'm teaching that are just getting into the game, and there's actually a couple older students that are just getting into the game. So like a couple 7-year-olds, and there's like a 75-year-old and also a 30-year-old. So 4 different people. Whenever you first have them hit golf balls, obviously you are wanting them to just kind of get aware, I guess, of how far the club head is from them so they can get good contact. But if they're doing something really bizarre in their golf technique at the beginning, do you think it's perfectly fine to prioritize certain things and make sure that they at least have a couple of movements and kind of constrain them in that way, and then learn how to make contact within that realm? Or do you think it's at the beginning just set a constraint like a tee, hit the tee, and then however they learn how to hit the tee is a good way for beginning?
You have to balance that, but I think it's very
hard question.
If you just want to have fun, then yeah, do whatever you want to make contact, but for that session. But even a kid who is going out with their buddies and is terrible at golf, but is still making contact, and sometimes making contact means you're still terrible, it becomes not fun anymore. And I mean, I have young kids. I work with junior golfers a lot, and I think you need to make corrections. Otherwise, you're just setting up. I've done it both ways, because I've been forced to. Because you can tell certain kids they don't want to grind. They don't want to improve their technique. They just want to be outside. And so even if I pushed a little harder and said, well, let's change your technique, let's do this, let's step away from the golf ball for a second, let's change your grip, you know what, we can't have the hands 2 feet apart. That's just not going to be, but that's the way they're making contact, so so you go, look, this kid I can't push anymore. They're just not going to want to play golf. And the pushing could be, hey, could you try putting your hands together? That's too much.
You are not going to control me.
This way works for me. It's clearly the best way. Okay, fair enough. But good luck with your driver trying to get any club head speed on the bottom of the grip. And that's an extreme example, but you have to make that choice for that kid. But let's say we're getting a little bit more along the lines of these kids maybe are thinking about being competitive, right? Then I think you definitely need to intervene. I had a kid who was 9 years old, 80 miles an hour with the driver, amazing swing from doing a lot of movements in the lab without hitting golf balls. And then decided, hey, I don't really want golf lessons. I don't want to take it seriously. I'm just going to play all summer. And 4 months later, this 2 degrees into out path, +4 attack angle, out of the center of the face every time, had become 12 degrees, slice path, open club face, -8 with the driver. It was, and then decided, wow, golf isn't fun. This is a 10-year-old who is getting beat by all his buddies. He's, the club championship was embarrassing. And that happened because he self-organized into, I think, I need to make contact. And so I don't know whether he topped a couple of balls, hit a couple of balls fat because of his positive attacking. Who knows what it was, but it shifted him into a terrible pattern that's been quite painful to try and work him out of. It really impacted his confidence. And this is a young kid. So, I mean, with that kid, I definitely would have said, hey, look, I know you just want to go out and play with your buddies, you don't want to do any lessons, but let's just maybe do a little bit, and I probably would have, I probably should have. Well, no, I shouldn't have. It was the kid's choice. So, but, you can't, it's a tricky balance. I tell a story, Rory's brother, Liam. You guys know Rory McIlroy has a brother?
Nope.
Never met him, no.
One brother?
Yeah.
Didn't know that. There's this amazing home video. I'm not sure who's shooting it, but you can see Rory's dad with his brother, and they're, I don't know, 4 or something at these little cutoff clubs. And all right, tees one up. Rory's dad tees one up for Liam. Liam steps in there, and he takes a practice swing, and it is just butter, right? This awesome move. Steps up to the ball, not quite close enough. Clips the toe of the club. This ball shoots like dead the wrong way, right? So then Rory stepped up. No, Liam wants one more swing. Okay, fine. One more swing, puts the ball up. And now he makes this rigid, stiff over the top move, but connects, goes pretty good for a 5-year-old, right? Boom, solid contact. Rory steps up, makes the exact same swing as Liam first on the practice swing, right? Looks perfect. Steps a little close to the ball, hits it dead out of the center. So now, okay, to make it fair, he gets another shot. Second one's dead out of the center. Boom. And then Liam steps up to hit his third shot. And now he's got that over-the-top terrible move. Never heard of Liam, have you? No, that's not a true story.
Yeah.
I don't think Rory does not have a brother, Liam.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
But
I love it. Love it. We're on tenterhooks here. Like, who's Liam McElroy?
Why am I so gullible? What is going on?
Yeah, Google search.
Yeah, like how close you are to going down a different path.
Yeah, like you can self-organize into crap really quickly, because how good your swing is, how good your move is, has very little to do with the ball flight when you're first learning, right?
Yeah.
So you could make, I do forward dynamics modeling research where I've got a mathematical model of a golfer, and I use a genetic algorithm to optimize their coordinations. And you could have this really complex coordinated system producing an awesome golf shot. But if the elbows are flexed like 3 degrees too much, you whiff it. Yet all I need to do is change that one variable and it's perfection. So that feedback from the ball when you're first learning can be, it's critically important, but also so detrimental to finding a really good solution.
But as you say, you can't just have someone saying, right, just make contact with this tee for the first 6 months and I'm going to perfect your movement, and then off you go. And it's that balance that I've never found, which is how much do you let players just go and learn and play, and how much do you try and keep their technique or aspects of their technique that you think are important in place. And I don't think we'll ever solve it, but it's fascinating to get your insight. Cautious of your time and how quickly we're going.
Look,
so can we jump on to...
after I read your list of items, I can just keep going for a little while.
Wow, Sasha, it's kind of
maybe 2 episodes, I don't know, but
wow, that'd be amazing. Even this so far has been superb. Can we move on to distance? Should we move on to distance and get a bit of insight?
Okay, you can move on with it. That's all right, whatever. This is so interesting. Let's move on.
Yeah, sure.
Backtrack to where you wish.
We want as much club head speed as we can possibly get to get that ball speed up. And the speed that the club head's going to be traveling depends on the forces that I put into the club on the downswing. We got this really nice spot at the top of the swing, especially if you think about a Hideki Matsuyama. He'd be the extreme version, but essentially for the vast majority of golfers, that club is going to essentially have no speed at the top. There'll be a little bit of movement in some direction, but for essentially it's mostly at 0. So I got to get this club head to have as much speed, go from 0 to as much speed at impact as possible. The way I think of it is not just speed, but energy. And the more energy we get into this club head, kinetic energy, the more speed we have. In order to change the energy of the club from 0 to some maximum amount of impact, I got to do work on it. Those are physics terms. And I do work by applying a force over a distance. And that distance is going to be the distance that my hands travel in the downswing. So the longer the path that I can get my hands to travel on the downswing. So if my hands only went to here and they got to here at impact, that distance that they trace out would be pretty short. That's going to limit the amount of club head speed I can generate. So the longer that path, so now that my hands are higher, if I can move them on a longer path impact, that's going to give me more potential to do what's called linear work. I like to think of it as jump starting a car. So if I've only got 10 feet to push a car to get it going really fast, I probably won't get it going fast enough to jumpstart it, if you think about an old manual. If I've got 100 feet, that's great. The longer distance I have to apply force to that car, the faster I can get it going. It's not just about the length of the hand path. It's also how much force you put in along that hand path. So the more force that I can put into that grip along that hand path as I'm swinging the club, then the more work I'm going to do. So when I'm pushing that car, it's not just about pushing it for a longer distance, but the harder I push. And it's no good if your buddy comes to push that car with you and he pushes on the driver's side door, right? And he's pushing 90 degrees. So that force has to be in the direction you're trying to push the car. And then there's also, not only can I do work on this club to change the energy of the club by doing linear work, but there's also angular work. So that's torque. So how much torque am I putting in? So you can see, even though I'm not linearly moving this club, I've got my hand on the center of mass, I can still produce a torque to get some club head speed. So the more torque and the bigger the angle I rotate the club through. So if I rotate that club through a bigger angle, I'm going to get more speed than if I rotate it through a little angle. And all you have to do is compare, just take a look at a long drive person. Crazy high hands, so they got a super long hand path. The club's wrapped all the way around their body. They're going to maximize the potential to increase club head speed.
Fantastic. And I think that's nice because it takes away a lot of the layers of complexity. And yeah, it's a physics approach, but you can't argue too much with it.
No.
I was going to say, what does this mean for golfers then? So that's the science. What does this mean for golfers trying to generate an extra 5 miles an hour club head speed?
Yeah, so the easy ones I see for the golfers that come to my lab who, probably due to poor contact, have worked themselves into a really short hand path. They don't move very far, just to free themselves up to get that club moving through a bigger distance, the handle moving through a bigger distance, and also the shaft rotating through a bigger angle. Now, maybe you can't find the fairway, so you got to dial it back a little bit. But if speed is what you're looking for, then that's it. And then you mentioned all the muscles and joints in the body. You don't need to think about those things. The task is just move the club through a bigger range of motion and let your body figure out how to do that. And some things that maybe you need a little bit of help being a little bit more specific, like lifting the lead heel. So if I'm trying to, if I think, wait, well, that's as high as I can get the handle. I haven't rotated my pelvis, but someone points out, well, you're allowed to lift that lead heel off the ground. Oh, okay. And I'm swaying a bit here, but I can still get into a position with higher hands by allowing my pelvis to turn a little bit more by lifting that lead heel. So we could think of specific things that the body could do to help us with that.
Nice. Connor, did you have a question?
Yeah. I had a golf instructor once who I felt like was he seemed to he had his own friend that was doing beta and stuff, or getting data from, and seemed like it was quite good information. But he had mentioned that it's like approximately 20% of club head speed results from the wrists, or from, like, I guess, that angular component that you're talking about, but 80% comes from the hand path, like the distance that it goes through. Is that kind of true, or is that kind of a random number that you haven't heard?
It's certainly more of the energy we put into the club comes from linear work, and 80% is not a bad number. Okay. So the force we apply to the grip versus the torque we apply. And by torque I mean like a pushing and pulling, like these hands. Our hands are rarely ever applying forces in the same direction on the grip, right? One is usually pushing, the other one's pulling. They're actually applying forces in pretty opposite directions. But I can still, just case in point, my two-hand swing might be 120 miles an hour with two hands on the club, but I can still swing 100 miles an hour with one hand on the club.
Right.
But with that one hand on the club, my ability to apply that torque is really, I don't have very much wrist strength. So that's kind of a clear way to say, right, well, you're still able to generate 100 miles per hour out of 120. It's because of that linear work, the pulling of the club, is still able to generate a ton of speed.
Great insight, Sasha. Great insight. And you've already nailed my next question, which is, to what extent should you be prescriptive with your instruction versus self-organizing? And I think what you talked before is great, which is you almost give a task, well, get your hands higher, but just find the best way for you to do it. Oh, your left heel can lift. So it's that nice balance of saying, look, here's some science for how to hit it further. Now you go and find how you can do it and how you can solve that task. Is that the best way that you see for players?
I always start with the most external thought possible. Hey, I'm suffering from, club heads. My distance is down. Okay, well, let's have you hit a few drives. Can you hit it further? Honestly, okay, maybe that's it. That's all I got. Okay, well, can you get this club moving faster? How fast can you get the club moving? And then it would be, it would be more and more internal. And if we're trying to actually speed, you can really only, I guess, I get so far down that, internal focus mindset. But with making a swing change, if I want someone to hit a draw, can you make the ball go right to left? Okay. Can you make the path go in to out? Can you close the face relative to the path, without having them think anything about their body? The last place I want to go is, I want you to feel like your, trail elbow is doing this.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to go there. Sometimes you have to get down to that internal focus. But then to me, the objective is to spend as little time there as possible. And where you want to get to with a player, and people never, you'd like to think everybody can get there, but they can't, is, hey, hit the draw the same way as we say, take a drink of water. We don't, heaven forbid, we're dumping the water like you're drinking a coffee there, Connor. You dump the coffee down the side of your cheek and you think, right, not enough elbow flexion.
I'll try better on my next rep. Yeah.
Right.
I've done that plenty of times, though.
even if you bang the rim of your cup into your teeth, you just go, okay, I got to put the cup lower next time. You're not thinking about any particular joint angles. Now, sometimes we have to do that with golf because it just that external focus just doesn't work. And no matter how many ways you try to approach it. So.
But I think you're right. The simpler you can make it, the better. And if that doesn't work, you then move up to the levels. I've got 2 more geeky questions on distance, if that's okay. Because I don't know them myself. That's the main thing. So reading a couple of studies looking at, I suppose, lifts in the gym and strength and power versus club head velocity, and their correlation studies. But it seems that strength is a better indicator of club head velocity compared to power. Now, I've got my own thoughts that I've tried to work out, but is that something you've come across, and would you be able to explain why that is?
I'd have to look at those studies. Power is a terrible word.
So I think to give you a bit more insight, it'd be mid-thigh pull, take that, and we look at peak force that someone can develop in a static mid-thigh pull versus rate of force development. And most of it has shown that sort of peak force is a better predictor or correlates better with club head velocity. So my thoughts with this, because I have a few players ask me around strength and power training, and the best I can come up with is, well, the golf club head moves quite quickly, but actually the way you describe club head velocity is our body segments are moving slow compared to some sports, and we have quite a lot of time with which to apply force. So it appears from the research that actually being able to produce a high level of force is more important than quick explosive forces in these lifts. But
yeah, I would say my conclusion there would be one study doesn't prove much. If it was a correlation study with 40, then I wouldn't even probably bother looking at it. If it was 280, then I'd say, all right, now you got my attention. Okay. But with 40, I don't know how many were in the study.
This was a meta-analysis, but I didn't dive too deep. But I'm just interested in your insight. If not, I can move on to the second question. Which first of all, I'm highly skeptical of the conclusion from that strength would be. It seems like a very specific exercise that probably in itself isn't very applicable to golf. Yeah.
I'd want to look at the homogeneity of like the population. Were these all golfers? I could see a few random really good golfers that just happen to have, and even how I would expect there to be an extremely high correlation. To me, you're starting with a very homogeneous group. That would be extremely high correlation between peak force and mid-thigh pull and peak power, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's that issue as well with this thing. So
let's move on. I don't like it.
Hey, no, don't worry. It's all right. I just keep that on my quest because I'm always like, should we be training more for strength or power?
Definitely
so
not
I ask.
Sasha, he's asked that the last 6 interviews, the same question.
As if. No, so second one, is mass important in generating club head velocity? So is mass of body segments, I know we don't want just fat for the sake of it, but is there any concepts behind that?
I think it can help a little bit. It's going to be a very small knob, but all else equal, more mass can probably be a bit beneficial. It will. Trying to think of a simple way to answer this. We've got some. Maybe it won't be that simple, but it's worth going down this route. Okay. I just happen to have you guys can see my feet. You won't be able to see my feet, but I happen to have a turntable here.
Yep.
And
I'm loving this.
I've got a lock on it right now, so it can't swivel. And that allows me to put torque into the ground. So if I was going to try and swing this club head, it's very important that I can change my angular momentum by applying forces and torques into the ground. Angular momentum from my body goes out to the club. And that allows my upper body to rotate one way without my lower body. And I'm swinging horizontally because I'm going to do a demonstration in a second where I pull that pin out of the turntable. So I can generate angular momentum. Well, the ground is changing my angular momentum, and then that allows it to go into the body out to the club. But because I'm not free to rotate here relative to the ground, the forces from the ground actually have a way to directly get into the club without changing my angular momentum. That's a second way that can help me generate club head speed. But there's a third way that has to do with my inertia or my mass. So if I take out this pin that's holding the turntable now, can you see my lower body at all?
Yeah, yes. Swiveling.
Yeah, so now if I try to
come 100 miles an hour, Sasho.
I can't even, my lower body is going to whip in the other direction. So, but if I was to picture like a massive, Connor, you're building a barn?
Yeah. My dad will kill me. He built the barn. I'm just helping him with wood stuff right now.
Okay. So picture a giant beam that you might have structural beam in the roof, something that's 8 by 8, maybe 10 by 10, and 30 feet long. If I was to set that down on top of this turntable, okay, and then I was going to get on this turntable with the beam. So now, essentially, that beam's given me this massive inertia, right? So I would be able to swing this club. I would rotate. There'd still be no change in angular momentum in the system. The total would be 0, but I would be able to swing the club against this massive inertia of this beam. So I wouldn't actually go backwards like I do now.
Yeah.
So even though I'm not adding any angular momentum in the system, the inertia of the club that I'm trying to move fast relative to my inertia matters. Consider the example of, so you could think of a golf club is not that heavy, but it's heavy enough where we need to interact with the ground or our mass matters. So I've got my stack here, a little training club, which we might talk about later.
Yeah, that's next up, Sasha.
If I take all the weights off it, okay, and I swing it, it's got such a small inertia that I can actually still get this going very fast, even though I'm on this turntable, right? A badminton player doesn't need contact with the ground to facilitate the generation of speed with the racket. Badminton racket, 100 grams.
Nice analogy, yeah.
The fastest smashes in the world records are always set after athletes leave the ground with essentially no angular momentum, right? So the angular momentum in the system stays at 0. When they make that smash, they need that angular momentum that goes into the racket is going to send their body backwards with an equal amount, but it's so small because of the inertia of the racket that, hey, it's no problem. They can move that racket really fast and their body doesn't turn away. The problem that we get into, and if we actually want to think about, well, why? What's happening? Well, when I get on this turntable, my muscles actually can't generate as much power. They can't do as much work because as I try to swing this club, those muscles actually contract really quickly. And the faster muscles contract, the less force they can generate. So by having my body rotate away from the club, have those joint angles open up faster, I add less energy into the system. That was
I loved it. I love that. Connor, you got another question. Connor.
So mass does matter a little bit, but not because we get to interact with the ground. The mass does not matter nearly as much as the muscular capabilities of the golfer.
Right.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, that does make sense.
Connor, you got a question on this one?
Well, this is cool. If in a golf swing, you see some of the best, like Cameron Champ, he has a really long, wide swing. It looks kind of like a baseball pitcher winding up. Is that lit, like the fact that he's not a step kilter where he gets his arms contracted real fast, does that mean that he has more potential for speed, or does that have more to do with the distance of the hand path that you were talking about earlier? So is it muscles contracting or hand path when you see those golfers that have real wide swings that create a ton of speed? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah,
I'm with it. I can translate if not. I think I know this.
He speaks Connor.
Let me give you an example of that will answer your question better than your own analogy, I think.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure.
So not so much the Cameron Champ, but you guys know that LPGA Tour players on average have faster hips than PGA Tour players.
I didn't know that.
I've come across one study with that, yeah. So.
Yeah, and it's not so like a friend of mine that I do a course with, Phil Cheatham. He's got data on 150 PGA Tour players and dozens of LPGA Tour players. So it's just kind of normative data. And so yet their club head speeds are on average 20 miles an hour apart. LPGA Tour average 94, PGA Tour average 114. Why are the hips moving faster, but this isn't relating to club head speed? Well, I can move my hips really fast, right, doing this, but I'm not adding any angular momentum into the system doing that, okay? I can contract the muscles around the hips to pull the hips, or I could use those muscles in my legs to have that femur, the head of the femur, drive my pelvis back. That's going to add angular momentum in the system. That's actually going to make the pelvis rotate slower than it would be if I just did this.
Yes.
Right? Versus if I actually use the muscles to push into the ground to get the head of my femur to cause that pelvis to rotate back. Those muscles that are going to be doing that, because they want to contract, like if I want to extend my leg and I'm contracting my quad, right now I'm going to go right. I'm going to fire that quad as hard as I can. How much energy is it going to get into the system? Not very much if I'm not pushing against the floor. Okay? As soon as I try to fire as hard as I can, that muscle shortens very quickly. That joint extends very quickly. This muscle in my quad is not doing very much work. If the ground gets in the way, so now, now I'm going to try to extend my leg. I can try to fire that quad as hard as I possibly can, but now that foot can't move. The ground's getting in the way. That's going to cause that muscle to contract slower. That's going to allow that force to build up. And over that distance, that muscle, that distance the muscle shortens. It's going to be applying a higher level of force, and it's going to add more energy into the system.
No, fantastic answer. And I think that's quite nice, because you can have things moving at a certain velocity, but actually, is it transferring, and is it adding to the next part of the system, is what you're essentially saying there. So speed for speed's sake is not useful. We're going to have some fun editing with this one. I'll wait for Connor to come back in, and then can we move on to the last section and talk about the stack system that you've got there?
Sure.
That'd be okay. Thank you so much again. We'll probably cut this little midsection out. So thanks so much again for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem.
With this one. I enjoy talking to biomechanists. I've got a friend at Leeds Beckett who we used to do the biomechanics for Steve McGregor's players, if you know Steve. So we got McRoy and Westwood. So I was involved in that in the early days. And it was fantastic. So we used to do full body 3D motion capture and everything. And he was one of the just best classical biomechanists. So anything to do with sort of these mechanical properties, he could just do it in his head, write it on the board, and just explain these concepts. So I've missed it in lockdown, and it's just great. Talking to you just reminds me of being with him for some reason, but I really enjoyed it. Connor, you're back again. Sorry.
To me, you have one of the bullets, Will, which was deterministic modeling versus dynamical systems theory. But to me, everything is deterministic. Even though it's so complex that sometimes we can't really apply the laws of physics because there's too many things going on for us to make sense of it. But I think if you're going to make a change to someone's swing, if we're actually saying, I don't like what this person's doing, I want them to do this to make this better, you better have that deterministically figured out in your head. So, if you're like, right, I want to increase your club head speed, we're going to do X to increase club head speed. Well, does it change the length of the hand path? Does it apply more force along the hand path? Does it increase the angle or increase torque? If it doesn't, then
don't do it.
Don't do it, right? Exactly.
And I think that's where I love your balance, because you've got a deterministic underlying model of what you're trying to do. But then from talking to you, it appears that you almost have this coaching hat on when you're applying these concepts.
Yeah.
And that's a tough balance, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. It is. But I spend, if I'm working with a player, I'll probably spend, so if I go to, spend 4 hours with the tour player, I'll probably spend 12 hours asking questions, talking to their coach, getting to know what their feels are, what their misses are, and so I've got distance is one thing that I help with more often than not, but I will rule out, here's all the things we can do to increase this player's distance. I can see their swing. They can send me, I can see their stats, here are all the things we can do. But just talking to someone, I can rule out, that's not going to work. That's going to be a terrible idea. Yeah. The better a player gets, the less likely I'm going to get them to do something that they find uncomfortable. So if I ask a player, hey, when you miss a shot, do you ever feel it in your hands? Do you ever feel like your grip's uncomfortable? And if they say, no, when I miss a shot, I always feel my grip's really comfortable. I always like how the club feels in my hand. That's never really a reason why I miss a shot. I am not touching that player's grip. There's not a chance in hell that I think I'm smart enough that I can change their grip and then get them to that same level of being comfortable. If you're the swing changer, you're taking an elite player to do, forces them. Let me paint this picture for you. They make a swing, they're teeing off on 4, and they make what feels like a comfortable swing to them, but they hit their terrible miss. Okay, that's no good. So then they get up to the next tee shot. If the change you're making them implement requires them to get into an uncomfortable position to execute it. So, okay, I hit that, I blocked it on 4, I'm up here in 5 tee box. I've got to put the club in this position, my wrists in that position, and it's uncomfortable. That I don't like that. If you're a beginning golfer, everything's probably going to be uncomfortable. But if you're an elite player and the swing change you have to make is uncomfortable, that's terrible. You've made a comfortable swing. It's a bad shot. And now your solution to that is go to the next tee and put yourself in an uncomfortable position to execute the shot you want. I don't like that.
It must be a tricky balance. I'm sure you do a very good job, but it's challenging. Hey, look, should we move on to the last part, or have you got one question on that?
One teeny tiny question on that. So if it's an elite player that's recently had a severe downturn in a portion of their game, like let's say accuracy, they are losing 8 shots around with their T-ball or something crazy, right? And it feels comfortable to them, and they've performed at an elite level. I mean, I assume then though you would be okay with adjusting technique, even though it's uncomfortable, correct?
Yeah, but I'm going to try really, really hard, Connor. Yeah, we're going to change the movement pattern, but it's going to be 2 movement pattern that's also comfortable.
I understand. Okay, makes total sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily easy to do.
Yeah.
But that's where it's like, yeah, you know, yeah, I like that. So they can step to the next tee and make an assertive move with something that feels good. You know,
yeah.
I want their bad swing to feel bad. I don't want the bad outcome to feel like a good swing.
And I think that's such a tricky.
Yeah, that's amazing. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah. Hey, I think is a good balance, and I like the way you're playing that. We'll move on to what you've got in your hand, and something I'm interested in hearing about. So yeah, look, this is a stack system.
Yeah, the stacksystem.com. Yep.
Fantastic. Could you tell us about, I suppose, the hardware and why that's designed? And then I was looking at your training programs, and I was very interested that you have these different options. So give us a lead. Yeah.
So I think the lowest hanging fruit to swinging faster for most people who've got not a lot of time is to do what I call variable inertia speed training. So taking something like the stack here that you can change the weights on. And you can swing weights that are slightly heavier than your driver, swing weights that are slightly slower than your driver, but really it's increasing the load a certain amount and increasing the speed a certain amount. Those are the 2 variables. So swinging lighter things is about attaining a certain percentage of your swing speed. Swinging heavier things is about increasing the force that you're applying, or the force that the golf club is applying to you to get that stimulus. And it's very individualized. So we have 5 weights you can add on to the end, but that gives you 30 different weight combinations.
Wow.
In roughly 10-gram increments, to something that's much, much lighter than your driver and something that's much heavier than your driver. Yeah, and that comes from, it's not about the mass. So when you go into the gym to lift weights, there's a 1-to-1 relationship with the number on the weights you're lifting and the stimulus, because for the most part we're lifting them slow. So hey, I want to double the stimulus, you double the weight. When you're moving something really fast, like a golf club, because I've added 40 grams onto this, that doesn't mean that the stimulus is increased by 40 grams. So that's why a lot of the research in this lab was done with, I marker up one of these stacks and a driver so that they've got, I don't know if you can see that very well.
We've got the shaft labeled up there with some lovely reflective markers.
Yeah, so over the past 5 years doing research, one of the foundational things is to figure out what stack weight do you swing at the same speed as your driver.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Because is the length the same as a standard driver, or is it shorter?
It's shorter. I've got it at a hybrid length because I've had lots of prototypes that were at driver length. That makes the mass easier, but people jam it into the ground. So there's this issue there. There's the freedom. So with the hybrid length, it allows you to swing it at the same swing plane as your driver, but without this fear of jabbing the thing into the ground and potentially hurting yourself. So started out, 5 years ago with research to say, hey, what's the right load? So doing inverse dynamics to figure, okay, if I want to increase the load by this percentage, how much weight do I add on there? If the stimulus is speed, how much lighter does it have to be to get at the speed? So figuring that out, then going through the studies to say, right, what loads produce the best adaptations. And then, now we got to a point where I teamed up with Marty Jertson. So instead of getting, the machine shop guy or lead tape on there, where we've got this pretty cool design where we've narrowed down the weights to add on and we can get to all these specific levels. And then the app will guide you through a training program. So we do like an intake session where we get you to swing the stack at a whole bunch of different weights. We get like a force velocity profile for you. We ask a few questions, and then that suggests a training program. And what's neat is as you go through a training program, the app knows how fast you're swinging certain weights, knows how fast you should be swinging it to get the right stimulus, and will adapt every workout based on the last workout.
Now, and this is the bit that I really loved, because I've done a little study with speed sticks with a professional, and I think one of the things is golfers are so under-conditioned on the whole that if they do anything, they get better. But the big question I had was, well, they got better, but would they have got any better with just swinging a driver quickly? And so I've got two questions around this. So how did those programs develop? That's the first question. And then my second one, which is one of the takeaways I had from my case study, which is how important do you think feedback is, and having this feedback of your swing speed during training as a factor to help people find their best solution? Yeah.
So how did it develop? Well, so coming from track and field background, knowing that if when I would do, let's say, overspeed or underspeed training, like towing a sled, and I had my my training partner, we both ran the 100 meters in 11 seconds. He was 220 pounds. I was 180 pounds.
Wow. That's quick.
We would have very different weights in the sled to get us at a certain percentage of our speed.
I see.
And we kind of do that through trial and error. So applying that same principle to the stack, but not really, sprinting isn't swinging a stick. We're only changing the load, not the external resistance. So let's do those studies. Let's figure out, and like you said, like 6 years ago when I started, didn't really matter what you swung, everybody gets faster. But over 6 weeks, did you get 1 mile per hour faster or 10 miles an hour faster? Right? So right away, I weeded out those weights are too heavy, those weights are too light. And then the studies got more refined, where then you say, okay, well, should you be doing all light or all heavy, or within a session light and heavy? So then you just kind of start to vary the variables a little bit, and then started to look at, well, what is the profile of the athlete that's doing this training? It seems like doing a mix of light and heavy works, but should you be doing more heavy or more light? Well, and then started to correlate the improvements to these profile data, like your current speed, your age, most importantly, how fast you swing things slightly heavier than your driver, and how fast you swing things that are slightly lighter than your driver.
Okay.
So if there's someone that swings something crazy heavy, the same speed as your driver, that's going to push you towards this type of program, versus someone who can swing light stuff. It seems like no matter how much lighter we make this, you don't swing it any faster. And we also, in the intake session, the baseline session, we do trail arm only, lead arm only. Are you just dragging one of your arms along in the swing? So that's how those programs initially came about. Not 20 participant studies here and there over the years, just to kind of get something that I'm pretty confident will work. But now that we've got hundreds of users in the app, and hopefully it'll eventually get to thousands, well, now we've got all this great data that the AI is built in, where not only are we tracking your individual performance to help you improve on a session by session basis and program by program basis, but population level, what are the best variables to tweak? Is it better to do stuff that's so, as a researcher, that is it better to do 6 sets of 4? This is just a really bad example, or 3 sets of 8, right? You would never really do that study, but you know what? If you've got thousands of users, why wouldn't I make one program 3 sets of 8 and the other program 6 sets of 4, just to see? you know?
I get the idea, Sasha, that nothing can make you happier than being in MATLAB or Python with stacks of data and getting really excited about significance levels and effect size.
Maybe.
Do you have access to all of the people's data so that you can just keep aggregating it, or like keep adding up all of your clients?
It's happening.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Happening right now in the cloud.
Oh,
that's amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah. And look, I'm going to try and get my hands on it at some point, and I'll certainly put a review up on Golf Insider.
Yeah, I have a client that is super into this. I think I'll have to order one. Where would I order one?
The stacksystem.com.
Stacksystem.com.
And check out our Instagram page. It does a really good job of kind of going through the highlights with some groovy tunes. You just flip through all the Instagram posts, the Stack System. And to answer your second question, Will, which maybe you've restated to make sure I don't miss it, but it was head to feedback.
Yeah, feedback and the radar, which obviously you suggest people use.
Yeah, it's critical, and we're constantly working at trying to improve the motivation within the app. So one feature is once you swing a certain weight once for a set. So I've got 105 grams loaded on here. It remembers how fast you swung it. And then it could be like 3 sessions later, you get recommended to swing 105 again. It pops up in your face. This is your previous best. And it's constantly, as the set goes along, as you take swing after swing, it's constantly updating your median for the set.
Fantastic.
And your goal is to beat that. The intent is everything in speed training. We start out from a safety perspective and also from a programming tapering perspective. Each program's got at least 4 phases, so you're not starting out at full bore. We have the first phase we have you swinging at, because most golfers aren't ready to go. Most golfers are swinging at 95% all the time. We've never exceeded that threshold. So the first phase is at what I call full effort, which is the most effort you'd ever put into a swing in a competitive round of golf. So you're probably going to get, a little bit, I don't want to say sore, but you'll get the stimulus from that just from the reps and sets as it is in swinging something a little bit heavier and a little bit faster. But then once you get into phase 2, then it transitions to mostly max effort, which is you just get this thing moving as fast as you possibly can. And if you lose balance every 2 or 3 swings, that's no problem. It's about exceeding your threshold. It's about the intent. And if you don't have that number, you don't know. And it's also, there's a lot about self-organizing as well. So running studies in the lab, I use the Flight Scope X3.
Yeah.
And every swing, when we have in the summer, people are coming in here every 30 minutes. And every swing's recorded, and they see it, the speed for every swing, and you can see them starting to realize, hey, if I do lift my lead heel, if I do kind of loosen up my grip a little bit, that number jumped. And even things like the X3s, the Flight Scope is nice because it gives you a swing plane, horizontal and vertical as well. So I'll tell golfers, hey, look, while you're in here, look, your path is, for righties, your path is way to the left. Like, make that number say right. So while you're swinging as hard as you can, you might as well work on your slice as well. So, right, and so there's the feedback is crucial, not only for the app to know what weight you should be swinging, but also for the golfer themselves. You need max effort. You need to get that stimulus.
I think that's fantastic. And I just want to pick up on that point as well, because I think we had a question earlier, which we got into, which is important practice. I've attempted to write skill act plans for players for the last 7-8 years. And I feel the 2 variables which stops players getting better is A, feedback, and B, probably practice difficulty or representativeness of practice. And so I think what I love about this system is that you get the feedback and there's all of this science behind it, but there's this sort of individual paths which you can explore to try and find your solution. But no, fantastic system. And yeah, I'm sorry I haven't got my hands on it yet, but I will have a go, and hopefully
we'll try to fix that.
Yeah. Want to be well. Thank you so much for your time already, Sasha, and also it's been brilliant. It's been such a visual display. We're gonna have to get more people to watch this on YouTube. I've got two questions that I actually came up in the research when I was preparing for this, which I'd like to ask just as quick. Is this true? But is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to cover before I ask these questions?
I'm enjoying the conversation, but no.
So we can tell from your demonstrations in this you're a very good golfer. Is it true that you're the club champion of your home club at the moment?
I am, yeah. It was a 3-hole playoff last August against a young gun. But yeah, current club champion, at least for another 3 months.
Fantastic. Do you have a parking spot at the golf club?
Is that a thing?
We used to have it, and now it's the kitchen staff took that spot, which is a bit of a tragic. I'll have to bring that back up with the.
Just go and park in front of the kitchen. Just like I own this spot. This is mine. Well, congrats on that one, and we can tell from your demonstrations through this that you're a pretty phenomenal golfer on that turn plate as well. And then number two, you mentioned your track and field background. So am I correct in thinking that once you jumped over a moving car as well?
I've jumped over lots of cars. I've never been stupid enough to do it while it's moving.
Over an actual car, you could clear a static car with a jump.
Yeah. I used to do it to raise funds.
That is amazing.
Wow.
That is incredible. So, I mean, Connor, we've not only been talking to an elite golfer and a phenomenal biomechanist, but a freak of nature in terms of force production and jumping as well.
Was it a smart car?
Oh, pretty much any sedan will do.
I'm joking.
The key is to have a buddy who can work the crowd. So you'd want to be at it would work really well at like a campground. If you're at like a festival or something, and you want to see my buddy jump a car, and it'd be, look, toss in $20. If he touches the car, you'll get $40 back. You get your 20 plus another 20, right? So
borderline bookie material.
Exactly. I'm gonna watch this guy wreck on a car, and I get to make $20. Sign me up. So then this kind of snowballs. So, but this is the neat part. So you jump it sideways, or jump it sideways first, and then you up the bet. All right, $40 in, but he's going to go lengthwise. But the funny thing is that if you look at the trajectory you have to take, if you're going over it sideways, you still have to jump so far away from the car that actually the parabola fits no matter which way you spin the car.
Such a biomechanist, Sasho.
That's a little bit of a trick, a little parlor trick.
Well, look,
I've had some incidents where things didn't go as planned.
I'm absolutely delighted both of those were true. That is fantastic. Sasho, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Really appreciate your time, and the visual demonstrations are something I didn't expect. Amazing. But they're 1,000%. They really are. They're brilliant. Cool. Hey, we'll let you crack on with your busy day, and right. We'll give you a shout soon when this is all up and ready. But yeah, thanks again, and keep up the fine work.
Okay, thanks guys. Thanks for being on.
Hey, thank you, Sasho. Have a great day, man.
Yeah, you too.